Basayo, basayo nge, basayo biso.
Are there enough? I don't know if there are enough chairs. I can sit down here. I don't know if the authors are on the stage.
Okay, Toby is not here, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4.
For starters, because CEO comes.
Yeah, and goes.
Yeah, so he just comes
Yes,
here
Martha.
and goes.
I'm going to call you from the floor.
Yes, I think that's fine. Yeah, I think
Let me call you from the floor.
sure. I'll go and sit next to my husband.
Where is he?
He's right there. Sit next to him. Okay? I just poured his water.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Because
Toby is
Nigat
online.
not here.
Oh,
Nigat and
Nigat-
Toby are- Yes.
No.
Martha?
Martha, you can stay because Nigat is not here.
Nigat is
No, she's
online
not
as
here.
well.
Is
So
online.
it's only
Okay.
me,
Okay.
Sonali, and Robert.
Perfect. Give me two minutes. We are waiting for the high. It's not the high table. We don't do high tables. For a few people just to come through. They'll be through in about 2 minutes. Okay. Huh? Reference mij? Back. Welcome, commissioners. Please take your seats. Commissioner Mpumlwane. Good morning, everyone, and good morning to all of you that are here physically. We have also quite an audience that is joining us virtually. Good morning to the virtual audience. You are most welcome. We feel your presence. Allow me to get us going. We are a few minutes late. We will try and make up for lost time. Let me first, for the audience that is inside the room, ask that you please remember your cell phones, either put them on silent or on vibrate. May I also ask the team that is looking at the facilities to please help us with the air conditioning so that the last row over there doesn't freeze. I'd be grateful if you could do that. And then the simultaneous translation. We still have English on channel number 1. We have French on channel number 2. We have Portuguese on channel number 3. I'll say that again. We have English on channel number 1. We've got French on channel number 2. We've got Portuguese on channel number 3. My name is Nomsa Masuku. I'm one of the 5 commissioners of the Electoral Commission, and I am your facilitator for this morning. I will also moderate the session with the panelists that you see before you. As customary, may I ask us to observe a moment of silence, please? Thank you very much. Let me, before we proceed, acknowledge the following. We have in our midst the President of the Electoral Commissions Forum of SADC and the Chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission of Botswana, Honorable Justice Barnabas Nyamadzabo. Let me also introduce to the virtual audience in particular, the Vice Chairperson of ECF SADC, as we call it, Mr. Dennis Kadima, who is also the Chairperson of the Electoral Commission of the DRC in absentia. Let me recognize the ECF SADC Executive Committee Chairperson and the Chairperson of the Electoral Commission of Namibia, Dr. Elsie Nikemboa. They are chairpersons, they are commissioners, they are heads of administrations, sometimes called chief electoral officers, in other places called executive directors, as the case may be, of various electoral management bodies. We've got senior officials of electoral management bodies with us as well, from the SADC region and beyond. Let us also acknowledge the acting UNDP resident representative to South Africa, Mr. Gabriel Dava, and representatives from all international organizations and partners here present, representatives of the Association of World Election Bodies, AWEB, that is its secretariat. We've got 2 representatives in our midst. Let me recognize the editor and our partner of the South African Journal of International Affairs, the guest editors and the authors, and then the Taylor and Francis Portfolio Manager for Southern Africa as well. If I have left anyone else, please do accept my apologies and let me say to you, I see you, I recognize you, even though I have not said your name here. May I then begin the session by reminding us you have before you This that you have, it has your program, it has the bios of all the people that will be speaking to you, but it also has the bios of all the authors and contributors to the journal that we have come here to launch. Incidentally, for the record, let me just say we're here to launch the special issue of the South African Journal of International Affairs, focusing on safeguarding EMBs in the age of democratic recession. That is what we're gathered here to do today. On that note, allow me to please welcome the Chief Electoral Officer of the Electoral Commission of South Africa, Mr. Simon Mabulu. Kulubo.
Good morning and greetings to everybody. Okay, you want to proceed until 8 again. Yesterday I had to intervene so that we can finish early, but I'm not rewarded with a proper greeting. The question that we may have is, why does the Electoral Commission of South Africa position electoral scholarship at the apex of its priorities during its tenure as president of AWEP? At the basic level, scholarship in elections is crucial as it promotes informed decision-making among electoral stakeholders. It facilitates knowledge-based decision-making. Electoral scholarship is not a pious enterprise intended to produce knowledge for its own sake. Rather, it is concerned about developing knowledge so as to better understand the inherent contradictions that define our current democratic realities. This publication, this special issue, assists with conceptualizing and articulating a cogent theoretical response to democratic recession. It provides a deeper understanding of electoral systems, legislative frameworks, policies, administrative systems, by fostering a more knowledgeable cadre of electoral administrators. Additionally, scholarship helps counter misinformation and encourages critical thinking, contributing to the overall health of electoral and democratic processes. Research in the electoral sphere is certainly vital for enhancing efficiency, fairness, and ultimately integrity of electoral processes, because it allows election officials and policymakers to identify and address challenges, but also to implement best practices and adapt to evolving threats and nascent technologies. Through research and scholarship, election administrators and election policymakers can optimize administrative systems of EMBs, voter registration systems, even improve voting station management, improve the performance of voting officials, enhance security measures, and ultimately ensure a more reliable and transparent electoral environment. So today's launch is part of a journey we started last year in October when we assumed the presidency of AWEP, the Association of World Election Bodies. The title of this special journal we are launching today is identical to the theme of the conference we held here in Cape Town in October last year. Safeguarding EMBs in the age of democratic recession. We see this, therefore, as a contribution to the building of the body of knowledge within the electoral sphere. We hope that it will be a basis upon which further research can be undertaken in an endeavor to build even a greater body of electoral scholarship. We therefore welcome in the most special way the various authors of the papers in the journal, 13 of them. And as will shortly become clear to you, the authors, your sense of duty has given the world's election community incisive and scholarly papers. For your labor, the body of knowledge is now richer. But special thanks must go to Martha Bridgman, and you're welcome, Martha. When we first had a virtual meeting to talk about the possibilities of this special publication before the end of 2023, Martha was of the firm view that it was a sheer impossibility. I think what she did not realize was that she was dealing with election administrators. But thank you very much, Martha, for your cooperation, and the institution you represent. It's been a journey of learning with lessons that I think other institutions can benefit from going forward. Commissioners and senior officers of AWEB member countries, most of whom are joining us virtually, you're most welcome to this special event. Chairpersons, commissioners, and officials of ECF SADC once again receive our most welcome. And similar sentiments of welcome are extended to the founding members of our August institution, SADC ECF. Our partners, SADC, CTICC, the UNDP, the UN's Electoral Assistance Division, the Commonwealth, International IDEA, IFES, ACAS, you too are most welcome to this important event. The heads supporting institutions of democracy, the so-called Chapter 9 and 10 institutions, you are part of the beacon of light as we navigate a difficult electoral terrain. So we extend a hearty welcome to you as well. The representatives of the Botswana government, you too are recognized and most welcome. Representatives of political parties, you are important players in the electoral process, and we welcome you. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues in the administration of the ICC, CEOs from the region, and to those who are supporting them, you all are welcome. And once again, this special edition, it's an incisive piece of electoral scholarship, and it will stay beyond our own tenure within the institutions we lead. It is a base that will stay for many years to come because it records rather realities of our current situation in the electoral sphere, and it will be there for many more generations to read and convince them about the right things to do in order to preserve democracy. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sai, for that welcome note. At this point in time, we go into a panel discussion. And at this point in time, I'd like to introduce to you a sample of the contributors to the journal. Some of them join us virtually, others are in front of you here. Let me start by introducing Professor Toby James, who is Professor of Politics and Public Policy at the University of East Anglia. He is joining us virtually. Let me introduce Dr. Victor Shale from the Electoral Commission, who is a general manager in the office of the CEO. Let me introduce to you Ms. Sonali Campion from the University of East Anglia in the United Kingdom. Let me introduce to you Ms. Now, I knew this was going to trip me. Ms. Nigat Adad from the Digital Rights Foundation of Pakistan, who is joining us virtually. Let me introduce Mr. Robert Gerenge of the United Nations Development Program at the regional office out in Addis in Ethiopia. And a person who has been referenced but not yet introduced. Let me introduce Dr. Martha Brigham, who's the editor of the journal, of the South African Journal of International Affairs. You're welcome. I'm going to ask, first of all, Professor Toby James to give us a summary of the special issue and position the special issue to all of you, both of the people that are here and those that join us in line. Is it connected? Okay. Toby, over to you. He's on mute. Toby, on mute. Toby, on mute. Uh-oh. Can someone talk to him on cell phone, please? Vic, do you have your phone? I believe those pauses allow us to breathe a little bit. So let us use this moment to breathe a little bit. I don't believe in coincidences. I think there's a moment, maybe we're tense. So let's keep breathing. Let's keep breathing. Toby's coming, you can see him.
Can you now hear me okay in the room?
Toby, welcome. I think you'll have to start all over again.
Don't worry, I didn't start. I was enjoying the moment of calm reflection as well, so thank you so much.
Welcome, Toby. Take it.
It's a real great honour to be with you today, to be part of the conversation. the guest editors themselves, and of course the authors who have made such fantastic contributions towards the scholarship of elections, which will be really useful for electoral practitioners going forward. I guess really this event is happening at a very important moment in time in our history. Up until now, the history of elections and democracy has been one of progress. It's been one where civil liberties have been spread around the world, and especially since the 1970s and the so-called third wave of democratization, more and more people have been able to participate in elections that have gradually been improving in terms of their quality and their inclusiveness. But in more recent years, we've seen headlines such as these. We've seen major concerns that potentially we're going in the opposite direction, that we've reached a tipping point. Concerns about democratic backsliding around the world. So, to give a very brief overview of the special issue, it really begins by trying to think about the concepts of this moment in time that we're facing. And it's often been argued that we're facing a democratic recession in many countries around the world. And we're seeing problems such as these featured on the screen here. Let's look at constitutional changes of government, for example, restrictions in civil liberties, or the spread of disinformation around the world. The special issue introduction begins by just trying to set out some of the key themes that we have in terms of the available data around the world. So according to the Varieties of Democracy Project, for example, this is the pattern. According to their data, around the moment of 2012, the quality of democracy globally began to level off, and then we saw a gradual decline. Well, what about elections? Elections are the absolutely indispensable part of the democratic process. They're not the only part, but they are the crucial part. So in the special issue, what we begin to do is to look at these trends with respect to elections. So the Electoral Integrity Project, for example, maps the quality of elections around the world based on expert assessments for each country. So we ask experts in South Africa, in Botswana, in Ghana, in Brazil, in Argentina, their assessments of the quality of elections. And actually, there's a better story in many cases than the news headlines that we see banded around the world suggests. In fact, globally, the quality of elections has remained quite stable. Of course, it has been the case that the quality of elections in some countries has gone down, but in others, it has gone up. So there are many, many more success stories than the media and the public perhaps realise. And this is a real testament to the hard work of electoral officials and stakeholders around the world. It's an important story to be told. That said, there are still variations in terms of the strength of the parts of the electoral cycle that seem to be working well, and those areas where there is need for improvement. The figure here shows you the increase in the last 10 years over parts of the cycle. Electoral finance seems to be an area that's marginally improving, but that is also the area where the greatest problems are often found in terms of the integrity of elections around the world. As the figure here shows, which is in the introduction to the special issue, again, you see a story of overall things remaining relatively stable, but also increases in the quality of elections in some countries, declines in other places. Now, electoral management bodies are really at the heart of this story. The story, the future of democracy, is an unfinished story. It depends not just on a range of structural factors, things outside of our control, but the essential work of electoral management bodies, the people who are the front line of democracy, that really make democracy happen for the individual voter. They are broadly often defined as the organisation or the body that has the sole purpose and is legally responsible for managing some elements of the election. So, what is the pattern? What are the patterns with respect to electoral management bodies? global patterns in terms of expert assessments. These are not our assessments, not my assessments, they are the expert assessments within the particular countries. And again, we see global kind of variations in terms of quality of delivery of elections. But the crucial thing is, what is driving, what is causing this, and what can be done? Now, I think as the introductory speakers pointed out, scholarship has a really important role to play here. And up until now, while a lot has been written for scholarship, there has been some major gaps. So it's been the focus of academics, for example, to consider the independence, the capabilities, and the constraints of electoral movement of it. And they are all very important factors. But as I say, we live at a particularly historic moment where different societal pressures are coming into play. New technological transformations are being seen, new democratic shifts and demographic shifts are coming into force. So the questions then that the special issue addresses are, what are the causes and natures of any democratic recession? What really are those challenges that EMBs are facing on the ground? Are they new challenges? And what are those policy solutions that can be introduced to strengthen electoral integrity in elections around the world, but obviously especially including Africa? So I can't really give and do justice to the whole special issue within this period of time. Obviously the authors will be much more eloquent in sharing their contributions to the special issue, but there are four broad themes. So the introductory 3 articles really set
Thank you very much, Professor James. For purposes of this moment, allow me to just call him Toby. And to my panelists, I will also just revert to your names. Pardon the familiarity. I think it makes it better when you call a person by their first name when you're having a chat. So the next thing that I would like us to do, what Toby has done is to outline the 4 baskets in the journal. But I think in very simple terms, today we're talking about where practice meets theory, thing meets analysis. And you have this movement where as you practice, and the theorists look at the theory, you improve your practice. But also practice goes back and influences what the development of theory. So this is where we are. At this point in time, I'd like these contributors to the journal. They have been selected in order to represent each basket. And I'm going to start by inviting Vic on my right-hand side. His full name is Victor. He gets the remarkable honor of being called Vic because that's what I call him. And he is going to reflect on the democratic recession trends, on impact on theory and practice. Vic, I accept that we will have to read your article that you've taken a lot of time to write. But will you give us a taster of this broad basket in the journal, please?
Thank you, Dr. Masuku. Allow me to align myself with the established protocol. I'm not necessarily presenting what I have written. What I am presenting, as you rightly said, is an overarching perspective on the title, on trends, theory, and practice. But I'm not going to take a lot of time because I think there is continuity from the discussions we had during the symposium. There was quite a lot of discussion around democracy, the different manifestations, the typologies, and so forth. So I'll go straight to the point. But maybe to begin by saying that when we conceptualized the theme for the AWEB Global Conference, we were driven by the awareness of the reality that EMBs find themselves. Of course, they are creatures of the political, socio-economic context within which they operate, but we find that more than ever before, they are really trapped into this evolving environment of what has been termed democratic recession. So there was quite a deliberate choice of the theme of the AWEB conference, and indeed this publication. We've heard from yesterday, as you will find in the journal, that, and indeed in many other studies, the reference to the accelerated breakdown or the reversal of democracy, the decline in inequality of democracy in large countries especially. This is really, especially if you look at how the likes of Larry Diamond look at this phenomenon. Then there's issues around political will, So the long and short of it is that the democratic recession discourse pendulum is definitely in motion. And we do not then belabor in trying to understand what it is about, because it actually does manifest in many different ways. And so it gets called by different names. It's a reversal. In fact, we had a new perspective yesterday from Professor Matlusa calling it a democratic hemorrhage. I must say, Prof, that sounds scary when you say hemorrhage. From a non-English speaker like myself, hemorrhage thinks like the end of the world. But so regardless of how you look at it, I think we are beyond that kind of discussion. But really, I think the democratic recession theory perspective is that once you have the manifestation of the kind of elements that were touched on yesterday, and you'll find a lot more of those in the journal, then democracy gets weakened. And then autocracy sets in. That's basically the general theoretical explanation to this. So the next question then is, how does it impact, especially on EMBs? My take is this differs from region to region. It also differs from country to country, and indeed, as we heard yesterday, and I'll come back to this point, it also depends on who is telling the story. The impact of democratic recession means different things to all of us, but it also depends on who is telling the story. If you look at the dominant school of thought, is the liberal democratic theory perspective. But what we had from the now new democratic hemorrhage perspective, the Matlosa school of thought, you also begin to see the emergence of a developmental democratic theory perspective. To say, if you are going to look at the impact of this recession or reversal, you need to analyze it from whether or not there is an element of a trickle-down effect, the dividends of democracy, the extent to which your ordinary citizen is impacted. When you look at the literature, you also begin to see the emergence of writings around the value addition of elections. And again, yesterday, Prof referred to the procedural to a substantive perspective, the value addition. Are elections an end in and of themselves, or are elections a means to a developmental end? I think that is what that school of thought is saying. But just to finish off on the point of the theoretical perspectives to the subject, you'll see in the journal that Professor Sally flips the whole discussion around from that democratic liberal approach to bring in the notion of, he actually counters the dominant perspective in this regard to say, actually what is happening is the emergence of the reversal of the legitimacy of the state. So he says this is not so much about democratic recession, but it is about the recession of the legitimacy of the state. And the central point of his thesis is that the liberal democratic recession theorists tend to focus more on the individualist approach to understanding this, and they then overlook the centrality or the role of the state in undermining democratic institutions. So for him, this is about the reversal, or rather the erosion of the legitimacy of the state. And you begin to see in that discussion also the emergence of an interesting, again, school of thought which I tend to sympathize with, but for different reasons. And this is the school of thought that speaks about the moral economy of elections. Because at the center of that school of thought is still the interrogation of the value addition of elections. But that school of thought tends to be limited on interrogating the civic virtue aspect, on interrogating the what they call patrimonial register. My preference in dealing with that kind of discussion is bringing into this whole issue around democratic recession what I think, or I find always missing, and indeed even in yesterday's discussion, that doesn't really come out quite strong, except that I think right in the end, a representative, I think it was Angola or Mozambique, sort of touched on it, but it was almost like right at the tail end of the process. For me, it is about the political economy of elections. And I raise this quite passionately as I do in my review of the book by Adam Prowelski in this volume, whose book is entitled, Why Bother with the Elections? Because in that book, Adam is raising very pertinent questions around what are elections. So he does, of course, in a very tangential way, deals around democracy and a debate around that. But the centrality of his thesis is about what elections are and what elections are not. It is also about the rationality of voters and indeed candidates and political parties in entering the space. And his conclusion is that elections, or contrary to the common conventional wisdom that elections are an instrument of authorization, says it doesn't always follow. And then he goes on and on about giving examples of where this is. Chair, I know when you look at me, you want me to stop.
Yes, I do.
So,
and I've got the time screaming at you.
Yes. So maybe just to conclude, Chair, and I can come back when we open up for the plenary. My view is that I think as we look at democratic recession, or whichever way name you call it, and its impact on elections, we must also confront the big elephant in the room, which is, in my view, the nexus between the business of elections, human rights, because if you look across, and somebody mentioned this yesterday, you look across, and the speaker mentioned it, and I have to make this point because I think that was quite profound, to say, as politicians, we always bash you because it's easy for us to do so. So EMBs are like endangered species. But the reality is the big elephant in the room is that why do we even bother to go to the extremes that we go as election managers to delivering a simple exercise? And at the center of that, you'll find that it is about the business of elections. So there's always increasing demands on EMBs to do this, to introduce this system and so forth, because of the elections, of the business of elections. Last point, Chair. It's the also commonly held a view that we all have to really do everything we can for the purposes of the integrity of elections. My argument is elections are not always about integrity. And I'm raising this point because somebody or two speakers yesterday spoke about the understanding of democracy and what it means to us as Africans. To say, elections, yes, are about integrity, but we also should not overlook the patrimonial value addition of elections, that some people participate in elections simply for kinship ties in our African context, nothing more. For purposes of, so they use elections to fulfill social purpose. So all I'm saying as a last point is that when we engage in electoral democracy discussions, safeguarding EMBs, mitigating democratic recession impact, we need not be carried away by the liberal perspective approach to the discussion that tends to take care mainly of the Western context.
Okay.
To look at all aspects that then help us to apply ourselves accordingly in different contexts. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vic. Sonali, I come to you. In the second basket of articles in the journal, we have those that look squarely at election management bodies. Let us hear your thoughts about that particular basket of thought. Let's hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, good morning. Morning. Thank you very much for inviting me here today, and I also really appreciate the wider opportunity to be part of such productive collaboration between the IEC and AWEB, the South African Journal of International Affairs, academics and practitioners. The paper I co-authored with Professor Jager, former chairman of INAC, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, asked whether democratic backsliding is negatively impacting election management bodies, or EMBs, as we now know is the snappy acronym. As backsliding is associated with the erosion of democratic institutions, we sought to find out if there is a decline in key EMB indicators which might correlate with a wider trend of democratic decline or recession. While our analysis focused on the period of democratic recession, which has been dated by Larry Diamond to around 2006, it is worth providing some background, as has been explored elsewhere in the special issue and Dr. Chalet touched on. The end of the Cold War and the end of apartheid saw a wave of transition toward democracy across the continent. Although a wide range of regimes types has transpired, competitive national elections have become both routine and widely accepted as the necessary means to legitimize political power. So this period saw the establishment of independent or so-called mixed model EMBs, where there's an independent oversight body. The advances in embedding elections and deepening democratic values in the 1990s and 2000 can in part be credited to concerted efforts by EMBs and their leaders to build capacity and strengthen electoral processes. They were often guided by international election observation recommendations and supported by financial and technical assistance from donors. The new generation of electoral institutions marked a break from fragile and easily manipulated election administration models that followed independence, often inherited from the outgoing colonial powers. However, the performance of individual African EMBs, even after these new structures were introduced, could still be weak or inconsistent during the third wave, often due to deliberate strategies to influence, obstruct, or undermine electoral institutions. So for our data analysis, we looked at the Electoral Authorities Index, which Professor James introduced the map that he showed, that's the Electoral Authorities Index, and Electoral Operations Index from the Perceptions of Electoral Integrity project, as well as election management data on autonomy from the Varieties of Democracy project. These data were selected as they give an insight into EMB performance and EMB independence, both of which have been shown in the academic literature to contribute to the integrity of elections. To summarize our findings, the perceptions of electoral integrity indexes suggested no overall pattern of decline in the past decade that might be associated with democratic recession. This again chimes with Professor James's introduction that election management bodies have, in some cases, held up very well. Instead, we identified significant diversity in EMB performance across the continent, suggesting some continuation of the mixed outcomes of earlier decades. Similarly, the EMB autonomy data showed that of the 51 African countries that we looked at, an almost equal number of countries experienced net decline and net improvement between 2006 and 2022. 4 EMB scores remained unchanged across the period. The autonomy data also offered additional insights which are worth noting. First, in many countries, the trajectory was not stable. There's been significant fluctuation over the 16-year period, suggesting that EMB autonomy across the continent needs to be cultivated and secured on an ongoing basis. Second, it was concerning to see declines among the highest performing EMBs of the mid-2000s, i.e. Ghana, Mauritius, and South Africa. In 8 countries, there were also declines between 2021 and 2022, which might be linked to COVID-19, although further investigation and data would be needed to confirm this. Clearly, then, there are still significant pressures on EMBs. To explore this further, we looked at 2 country case studies. The case of Zambia showed that backsliding can significantly undermine institutional integrity and stakeholder confidence. However, even in this context, an EMB can maintain a level of functionality that ultimately delivers a turnover of power that is accepted, as we saw in 2021. The case of Ghana shows that escalating polarization, particularly in the social media age, and the weakening of mechanisms that build political consensus around the delivery of elections have impacted negatively on the perception and operational independence of the EMB. The particular challenge posed by political polarization to election delivery is also explored in another special issue article by Toby James and Holly Ann Garnett. Our study therefore shows that the challenges facing EMBs are multifaceted and come not just from anti-democratic leaders, but from factors ranging from weak legal frameworks and evolving digital technologies to environmental factors such as pandemics and natural disasters. This points to the need for sustainable and coordinated efforts to strengthen EMB autonomy and performance, and many of the policy recommendations in the special issues speak to this. Mechanisms for stakeholder consultation and engagement, particularly with political parties, must be strengthened to build trust, but also political buy-in. It must also be recognized that both the demands on EMBs and the number of organizations involved in electoral governance today has proliferated. Strong working relationships are therefore required with a wide network of everyone from civil society, the media, government bodies, suppliers, security agencies, tech platforms, courts, to deliver the capacity and expertise required for credible elections in the 21st century. These networks must be cultivated not just during the electoral period, but over the electoral cycle in order to strengthen the democracy ecosystem that was discussed yesterday in the symposium. High quality and effective human resources are also critical for the credible elections. Another recommendation I'll highlight is from the second paper, which I co-authored with Toby James, Holly Ann Garnett, and Eric Asplund for the special issue. This underscores the importance of training institutionalization in election management. We argue that the more embedded staff training is in the electoral process, the better the quality of elections and the experience of the citizen will be. We identify factors which contribute to institutionalization, namely legal requirements for training, mandatory training or certification for poll workers, the temporary poll workers, ongoing learning and development opportunities, especially for permanent EMB staff, and organizational infrastructure for training and professional development. The study draws on analysis from a global survey of election management bodies and finds that training institutionalization tends to be associated with the overall quality of democracy and economic development, suggesting it is a worthwhile area to invest in. So to close, effective election management bodies are characterized by independence, but independence which exists not just on paper, but in practice. It also requires EMBs to have the capacity to deliver on their mandates and the ability to inspire confidence or trust in citizens. Just as elections should not be conflated with the realization of democracy, an effective EMB alone cannot deliver a credible election. However, resilient electoral institutions are an essential part of the realization of electoral integrity and elections that would contribute to democratic strengthening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sonali, for that, and thank you for delivering it within the allocated time. No shade to you. No shade to you, none at all. Okay. Let us, I think, move on, and we've moved from trends, from theory to practice, and we've talked about the election management bodies themselves. Let us go into the wide terrain of societal changes. And amongst the vast array of possible societal changes that we can talk about, Nihat is going to talk about digital technology and implications on elections, and she's joining us online. Is she connected? Welcome. Hi.
Yeah.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
First of all, thank you so much. It's a treat to hear Sonali and Toby and Professor Shelley setting a stage really well and also reflecting on the work that has been produced. My contribution to this journal was basically around looking at the digital technologies and from the perspective of electoral process, but also integrity of information in the online spaces. And I'll be talking a little bit about that, but also some of the challenges that many democracies and governments and election bodies around the world are actually facing when it comes to technologies online, but also technologies related to electoral process as well. As we navigate this digital era, I think it's very important, vital for us to recognize that the use of technology in elections is not entirely novel. digitized voter rolls and electronic voting systems are becoming commonplace, accompanied by a focus on using technology to disseminate information about elections, including voter registration, polling stations locations, schedules, results, which moves towards digitization and aims to improve voter education around registration and increase turnout, and which sort of fosters a more inclusive democratic process. However, we also need to look into some of the technologies that we really, when we adopted them, we really didn't look into the human rights framework. For instance, biometric systems. And while seeing those systems as a solution for effective voter registration and verification, really raises a concern about privacy of individuals or data protection practices. We have systems around the world, like Aadhaar systems, or even in my own country, where biometric data has faced criticism for excluding individuals who cannot provide, for instance, fingerprint data or whose biometric markers change over time. The next thing that I want to look at is basically our digital platforms and how they are seen as tools of persuasion. Over the last 2 decades, election campaigning has shifted from traditional offline spaces to digital platforms. We have seen that in Obama campaign, for instance, like, I think that was kind of the start of, pioneering social media mobilization, which exemplified its transition from offline to online. Social media platforms have broken down barriers, democratic discourse, providing accessibility to election discussions and candidate accountability, particularly benefiting independent candidates and smaller political parties who do not have massive resources like big political parties. However, civil society groups all over the world have already been voicing out their concerns around online information integrity during election time and the need for tech platform accountability, especially in more crumbling democracies. In my own organization, Digital Rights Foundation, we have been working on monitoring the upcoming elections in Pakistan, for instance, that are being set to happen in February next year. But we have already worked on this white paper titled A Southern and Southeast Asia Lens on Online Harmful Content and Platform Accountability During Elections, where we analyze social media platforms' policies on previous election cycles in South Asia and Southeast Asia, particularly with respect to harmful content like hate speech, technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and disinformation, which has undermined electoral processes and eventually the democratic process. And when we look into these developments, especially in the global majority world, we always, as a civil society based in global majority world, keep in mind that not everyone has equal access to digital spaces where internet accessibility is distributed along lines of class, gender, abilities, language, and digital skills. And towards the end, I would also like to touch a little bit on emerging technologies as well. So I feel that we have been into this era of social media platforms for more than a decade, and now we are entering into era of new technologies, emerging technologies, and I'm not sure that we are really ready to understand, what we are up against at the moment. So it's basically artificial intelligence and generative AI, and it complicates the electoral landscape. AI journalists, women human rights defenders, and marginalized groups in general. The unchecked nature at the moment of AI-generated misinformation and disinformation and manipulated media actually calls for effective measures to prevent its misuse, not only governments, not only tech platforms or AI companies, but actually also electoral bodies, that how they are looking into this space. And addressing this challenge posed by AI emerging technologies, I believe it requires collaborative efforts, as I mentioned, while recognizing the potential benefits of these technologies. It is important for us, for each one of us who are in this room, but also the ones who are working on this issue, we really need to develop governing frameworks which are rooted in the human rights, international human rights standards and framework. The ICCPR, for instance, provides a benchmark of regulating technology during elections, emphasizing the right to freedom of expression, privacy, political participation, and other fundamental freedoms. And as we moving towards looking into this emerging space of technology around electoral processes, it is imperative to ensure that these regulating measures or governance measures do not exacerbate existing inequalities. Efforts should be directed towards increasing digital literacy, building trust in institutions, and fostering greater inclusivity in digital spaces. Regulations, policies, frameworks should be designed to mitigate the unchecked spread of misinformation and disinformation, but also manipulative media around AI, without compromising freedom of speech in the online space, right to association and assembly in the online space, and right to privacy. And I think striking this delicate balance requires collaboration and continuous dialogue among stakeholders like the one that we are having today. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Spot on.
Spot on, Nega. Thank you so much for that. And she tackles an issue that I think we spoke about quite a bit yesterday. And as you can see, since yesterday, we've been weaving through the four baskets of the journal. Let me go to the last basket. And the last basket has to do with policy instruments. And may I invite you, Rob, to talk about policy propositions for inclusivity and electoral assistance. Over to you, please.
Thank you, my dear sister, as I always call you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I'm looking at the issue of inclusivity and electoral assistance, but the paper I authored is focusing on the role of the African Union in tackling democratic recessions in Africa. Now, in terms of electoral assistance, which touches partly to Baidesu's paper on mitigating democratic recession through electoral assistance, broadly speaking, in terms of electoral assistance practice on the continent of Africa, the community of practice has always approached the issue of inclusivity from a demand-driven approach, where they assess the needs of various actors before they respond to their needs in terms of defining the electoral assistance approach. And there is emerging practice right now that electoral assistance is not just located in the national level, but also through peer learning, where electoral commissions also learn from each other, like what we saw yesterday through the symposium. And this is something now becoming very common and established, where electoral commissions learn from each other in order to approach the issue of inclusivity. Now, over time, we've seen that electoral assistance has integrated the electoral cycle approach, where the question of inclusivity is not just about the voting day, but also supporting EMBs and national stakeholders to integrate the question of inclusivity through the electoral system design, through voter registration process, special voting arrangements, for instance, for old people, the sick, and also now we're seeing even prisoners, special voting arrangements for prisoners and so on. We've also seen the question of addressing underrepresented groups, such as women, youth, and people with disabilities. We saw that kind of conversation coming up yesterday during the symposium about strategies of ensuring inclusion of these underrepresented groups. And just the previous speakers has talked about the issue of digital inclusion. And so because right now we don't just deal with the physical marketplace, but also we deal with the virtual political marketplace where ideas exchange, and also where we can find that voters decide not to participate in an electoral process just because of what they read in the virtual marketplace. But I just want to address three propositions regarding inclusivity, which I think needs to stretch our tentacles in the way we look at elections, in the way we look at the issue of inclusivity, and also in the current context of conversation around democratic recession globally, but also in Africa. First of all, I have had an experience in the past where I was in a polling station and I saw the presiding officers counting ballots, and I saw one of the ballot papers which was decided to be counted as a spoiled ballot, as an nullified ballot, because one voter decided to just draw a cat chasing a mouse in a polling station. He took his time and just drew that instead of choosing a candidate of his choice. Now, what we've seen in some of these kind of cases in terms of electoral assistance, you find that we have this magic bullet called voter education. I don't think that kind of voter who decided really didn't know who to vote for. He just decided to protest, and that's kind of form of protest. And basically trying to say that we should not always approach this question of inclusivity from a magic bullet of electoral assistance, just to tie electoral assistance to issues related to governance. At times this protest vote is also about protesting about the state of governance, and there's necessity for linking electoral assistance to governance. And in fact, I remember in the past when we were working together with Dr. Matlos at the African Union, he always said that I think we need to shift from technical assistance to electoral governance, so that we have this, we inject the tinge of inclusivity from a governance approach, not from a technicist approach. The other aspect, which I think also we need to look in terms of policy position, as far as electoral assistance is concerned in inclusivity, is not to treat other represented groups as homogeneous. And I think this came out yesterday from the symposium, that we cannot treat youth as a homogeneous group or women as homogeneous group. We have the different kind of divides. We have rural and urban divide. We have the employed and the unemployed, and they have different motivations when they participate in an electoral process, and even the question of digital divide, and also people with disabilities. There are different kind of disabilities, and that is very, very critical. Most of the time, for instance, we look at the question, for instance, of braille papers. It attends to a particular group of people with disabilities, but others tend to be excluded. So that kind of homogeneity affects the nature in which we approach electoral assistance. So I am suggesting a policy proposition of heterogeneity in terms of disaggregating this kind of responses. I think the final one, which current research is not addressing, especially in the context of democratic recession, but also in terms of the resurgence of unconstitutional changes of government, especially in Africa, is that there is a neglected category of the military. The military, if you look at most countries in Africa and globally, they participate in elections. They do vote. And I've witnessed in some of the countries where I've participated in elections in Africa, where one of the largest military barracks voted against their commander-in-chief through elections. And those elections were highly contested in terms of the outcome. We need to look at the military, first of all, as citizens who also exercise their political rights. And in fact, if I ask in this room how many people here in this room, and even those virtually who are connected to, who are related to a soldier, you'll find almost all of us, whether they are uncles, whether they are cousins, and nephews and nieces, and so on. And this kind of category, in the context of understanding the resurgence of military coups on the continent of Africa, there is that aspect of inclusivity that we need to understand this kind of group, not trying to say that I'm an apologist of coups, but the question of investigating the issue of inclusivity as pertains to the military and how they are affected when there are contested elections. Not to say that they're actually benevolent coups, but how does it affect them? Especially, and in that regard, I'll suggest a political sociology understanding and research agenda for the military inclusion in electoral processes, because I think this is also a special category as citizens, especially because the social and economic realities affecting every other citizen in our countries also affects them. And so it is important to study and invest more in the research agenda that relates to them. I think maybe the last aspect in terms of policy proposition which attends to EMBs is that we don't invest much on the research. In fact, if you look at budgets of EMBs in terms of how much they invest on research, most of the investment and even financial budgets is usually on electoral operations and so on. We don't look at aspects relating to research, and the research agenda in terms of looking at inclusivity, I think it's prime. EMBs need to invest more, and they need to allocate more resources to understand some of the things that in fact affect them directly relating to the issue of inclusivity. And I think that is also a question that needs to be addressed by electoral assistants, where they need to engage more in deeper understanding the question of inclusivity, and so that the responses are more adopted. I think I'll stop here because I see time is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you very much to the audience that is both on the virtual platform and all of you that are here once again. That takes us through the tasters. That represents what you'll find in the journal. We have about 20 minutes that we can use for, I think, what I call engagement, more than question and answer time. If you want to contribute to, and I hope that you do, want to contribute to the conversation, remember the journal has 4 baskets. If you need me to remind you what they are, happy to do so, or you can just look at the program. If you are here sitting physically, if you're not, I will take you through it. So if you want to contribute and talk to the people that are here who have been through this process of compiling the journal, this is the time to do it. With a show of hands, please, May I ask that when you raise your hand, you introduce yourself, you tell us where you're from so that we can situate you in any of the participants that are sitting over here. I'm looking across the room for takers. Whilst, thank you very much. My brother Rahman, please. Remember to introduce yourself. I know you very well, but I don't think everyone has the pleasure.
Thank you very much, Chair. Irfan Rahman from Mauritius. I've got two questions.
Sorry, can you deal with the sound, please? Sound?
Morning, is that better now?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Project your
thank you
voice.
very much,
Use
Chair.
your church voice.
Thank you. Irfan Abdurrahman from Mauritius.
Thank you.
I've got two questions from my friend Sonali. You've been talking earlier about the autonomy of EMBs. I take it you mean the autonomy provided for by the constitution of a country, by the legal framework, and also, I'm sure, you meant the autonomy on the ground, the operational autonomy of the EMB when dealing with elections. And also, probably through you, a question for Toby. When we talk about in-country experts trying to help you prepare your reports, would it be possible for you to tell us about the guidelines for the experts? How do you get the experts from each country? Are there any guidelines, established guidelines, protocols, or they are just taken haphazardly from each country? Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. I'm going to take another one. Panelists are noting. Is that a pen for a pen? Yes, please, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jonathan Kibero from the Good Party here in South Africa. Ma'am, I've listened to the presentation and I'm quite impressed with the presentation. But I'm just wanting to come to and allow me to localize this to South Africa at this moment in time. I'm listening to the awesome ideas, but however, I'm not seeing anything that's speaking to a relationship between the IEC or the commissions and the governments that we're having in place. For one, when we speak about social media and we speak about the misinformation and stuff that's going around on social media, I want to bring your attention to two cases maybe that transpired here in South Africa not too long ago. One was in the case of the Electoral Commission and Patricia de Lille, the Democratic Alliance against the Electoral Commission and Patricia de Lille. And the other one was the ANC, the Democratic Alliance versus the ANC. In the one case, the Section 89(2) of the Electoral Act was used. And the Electoral Court has found that the party was in violation of it by saying that they have fired Ms. de Lille when in fact she resigned. In the other case, it was said that the former president, Mr. Jacob Zuma, has used money to build, state money to build his house. In both cases, the Electoral Court, or the High Court of South Africa, has turned around and said that that has been an opinion, instead of where the Electoral Court has said that it was a violation of the Act. The High Court has now overturned it and said, no, we should see it as opinions. So when we're speaking about social media and we're speaking about the fact that this section will again be used in social media, we are not sure whether the High Courts will again turn around and say that that's an opinion. So what I'm thinking of is that we should get some sort of a way where in South Africa specifically, the IEC should have some sort of a relationship with the Minister of Culture and identify these type issues and suggest that we have amendments to the act in our countries to ensure that there's a relationship between to create the protection. Because what I'm lacking in this whole thing, or what I'm seeing as lack in this entire process that we're going through, is the protection. I can't see where government is actually assisting the IEC to ensure that political parties and or any other person independent who is contesting in an election are being protected when the High Court of our country, for in this instance, can simply just turn around the decisions that the IEC has made. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is my volume...
Am I audible? Okay, better now? Okay. Please, Artie.
Thank you. I'm Commissioner Jenuna from Namibia. I've been listening to debates since yesterday, and I'm trying to link my intervention to yesterday's discussion as well. For me, the challenge to democracy and elections in Southern Africa, or in Africa for that matter, comes down to one thing, and that is, in my opinion, the Western liberal democratic model has proven to be a bit problematic in our part of the world. Why do I say so? I think one of the contributing factors will be the low levels of literacy of our people. Secondly, the marginalization of African languages, because you will find that the constitutions, the policies, and so on are, for the most part, written in European languages. These are the official languages. And most of our citizens are not at home in those languages. So what am I trying to say? The result is that you find that, for the most part, our citizens have not yet reached that level of knowing or realizing that in a republic, elected leaders should serve on the basis of a borrowed mandate from the people as sovereign citizens of that republic. And I think that's, for me, we have that disconnect. And perhaps that's where we should come in as EMPs to up our game as far as civic education is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can see you, Nkaru, over there. And that will be the last one for this round.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Nkaru Mateta. I come from the Electoral Commission based in Limpopo Province. Thank you very much. I would like to comment on Victor Charles' input on the role of the state in undermining democracy. I think states differ, and I don't know whether this undermining of democracy by the state is deliberate or it's based on affordability. If it's deliberate, I think you could then perhaps elaborate on where this deliberate undermining, perhaps underfunding, the economy of elections, underfunding the electoral commission deliberately so, and then what happens when such elections are run. Then my second question is on the presenter on democratic backsliding. I think there is an observation around the 51 countries across the continent of Africa. And I think there is an observation based on research that 4 EMBs across the continent remain unchanged. So in other words, this democratic recession and whatever, is not affecting these 4 countries. I would like to hear what these 4 countries are. What is it that their residents are doing or are not doing to have these 4 countries remaining the same? So whether they ran their first election in 2012 and today is 2024, nothing has changed. It might be that participation is still 90 or 80% and so on. So if you could just clarify us on that particular aspect. My last comment is on these digital technologies. I think regulations, I think yesterday there were debates on the regulations, how people are abusing the digital platforms and they are misusing digital platforms. I think the speaker made reference to the fact that somebody somewhere, I did not get to hear who, has developed regulations. Normally when you develop regulations, the main challenge is the enforcement of such regulations and whether these regulations have been effective and they've been enforced, and is there an example where through the enforcement of this regulation somebody perhaps was fined or something happened to that particular individual who was misusing the digital platforms. I wish to thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to start with you, Sonali, and the first question was directed to you.
Yeah. So, hello? There we go.
Can you still hear?
Yeah.
There we go.
So, yeah, in terms of methodology questions, sorry, let me just bring it up. So, there was the question about the EMB autonomy data. So that is VDEM data, which it draws on the legal, the de jure autonomy structures, but it also takes measurements for in practice. And that's why you get more fluctuation, because often the legal wouldn't change every election. In terms of how the methodologies work, it varies between databases, but experts are usually given quite strict coding instructions, and they're selected through competitive processes and things like that, and that information is usually available with the individual databases, so you can see the code books, the instructions that they have, and things like that. So both VDEM and perceptions of electoral integrity have those. I think there was another question at the end about the 4 countries which didn't change. So they were the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Sao Tome and Principe, and the Central African Republic. I think in a lot of cases, these are some of the lower level performers that there's just not much innovation over time. However, individual case analysis would be needed to really understand the stories there. And that's what we sought to begin to do in our paper by having a couple of case studies. But I think it shows the importance in research of using case studies and drawing on the real world context, understanding scenarios before we draw conclusions about policy instruments and things like that, because the top level trends and data, they tell stories, but we need to really dig into those stories and understand what's going on in the specific cases.
Okay, thank you. Nikat, are you still with us online?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Would you like to tackle the question on social media?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think there are 2 questions that I could gather. One was related to, electoral bodies working with the governments in terms of like looking into this space, and then high courts or courts coming into this space and sort of playing their role, sometimes positive and sometimes not really like favorable. And I'll just try to give an example of my own jurisdiction. And one thing that we are struggling with the electoral bodies at the moment is, for instance, Election Commission in our case, that they know what is happening in the online space, but even after, the use of online spaces have been there for the last 10 years now during the election campaigns, during election day, but they really couldn't translate regulate. I think we lost the opportunity in last decade to look into the proper regulation around social media platforms, but now is a time to look into emerging technologies space, and I think while everyone is struggling, electoral bodies should be part of this conversation around looking into emerging technologies and then election space, and how they are also part of the conversation and eventually solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nehat has to leave us at this point in time. Could you please join all of us to say thank you to her? Thank you for everything, Nehat. All the best. And have a great afternoon in your part of the world. Let us continue with those of us that remain. And talk about, there's one question about the protection of EMBs. It also was related to social media, but I'm going to ask any of the panelists that want to have a go. Who wants to have a go?
Thank you, Chair. I can attempt that, but I'm sure Robert might want to say a bit about that as well, given that he operates largely with different EMBs, so the context is important. But I think I want to begin by dealing with the point from Good, to say that, you know, one of the challenges of electoral management and administration is that there tends to be an expectation on EMBs, or on elections, maybe to begin by, say so, by elections to solve all the ills of society, or to respond to the wants and needs of the different actors. And therefore, the reality, especially in the global south, is that a lot of these expectations, the historical socio-economic issues, tend to be carried over into an election sphere. That, I think, is a serious challenge for all of those who manage elections. But coming specifically to your point, I am not aware of the specific issue you are raising, but suffice it to say that ours is an independent model of election commission. What that says is that within that independent type of an EMB, or that EMB exists within a very clearly set constitutional and legal framework, which also provides recourse in instances where there is real or perceived divergence with the law, or with what would be the acceptable norms within election management. So sometimes EMBs do need protection, but sometimes they don't really need protection, because valid as the concerns might be, you may find that they hardly ever sometimes have anything to do with the EMBs. But there is that expectation that the EMBs sometimes have to address all of these issues. The question regarding the role of the state, no, I was merely depicting a picture of the different positions regarding the subject of democratic recession. To say one of them points a finger at the role of the state and posits that the state in some contexts tends to undermine democratic norms. And indeed, we see this all the time, so it's not really a far-fetched proposition to make. On our own continent, we've seen weaponization of elections, where again, as a result of the unresolved political, historical concerns, and also because elections in our space are what has become, or what has been labeled as a war by other means. Everyone wants to win. You'll find that contestants sometimes then deploy the kind of tactics that end up sometimes. I mean, who would forget that we once had a situation in Zambia where none other than His Excellency Kenneth Kaunda's nationality became a question of an election contestation. One of the founding fathers of our region gets imprisoned and his identity questioned, that after all he is not a Zambian, he's a Malawian or something like that. That's when elections become weaponized. That's when we get to the kind of point I was just elaborating on that, but also the uneven distribution of services, the uneven distribution of the dividends of democracy. That's when the state deliberately undermines democratic norms. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rick. Rob, could you just sweep through all the contributions that have to do with policy, with that realm of this discussion, and try, and if you can, and be a magician and cut through all of them in literally half a second. Thank you.
But I don't want to do magic. Thank you. I think there was a question about the indigenous languages, marginalization of, internalization of the lexicons, because the text that we read, even when you talk about proportional representation electoral system, how do you state that in Zulu, for instance, or my friend Victor in Sesotho? So I think what we need to do, and I think that was a very fundamental question that our brother raised, in terms of contextualizing democracy in Africa, is a need which we have not done on the continent, to develop lexicons. I saw that has been done in the post-Arab Spring in the North Africa. You recall in the 2010-2011 Arab Spring, there was a revolution, and then there was all this transformation and wind of change, and they decided to engage in developing Arab lexicons or around elections. What is an electoral system in Arabic? What is first past the post in Arabic? And all these terms. We have not done that in Africa. I think it's very important. Why? Because we internalize, we do meaning making through the language, which is embedded in culture. And so I think that is something that we need to think through as a continent. I know, for instance, during the constitution-making process in Zimbabwe, 2010, which I was involved in, during the public outreach process, they will ask people in the rural areas in Shona, in Ndebele, so that they are able to respond through how they understand what should go into the constitution-making process. So this is something I witnessed during the public outreach process by COPAC. And I think this is the kind of thing that we need to promote in terms of internalization through the language. There's an aspect which relates, I think, to state funding of EMBs. We understand that EMBs need to have funding that is predictable. And of course, there are different institutional arrangements on how EMBs are financed on the continent of Africa. But I think what is critical to understand, because we've seen undue pressure on EMBs when budgets are held for political reasons. We know that there are some elections in some countries which have been postponed because of lack of budget, for instance. And there's all that the politics around the budgeting issue. I think that there has to be a conversation on the policy agenda on how to ensure that EMBs are financed in a way that they're not subjected to undue political pressure on the question of funding. I think that's very critical. But the last one, maybe tied to that, is that, and this we even discussed during the Cotonou Forum, is that also EMBs need also to curtail the cost of elections, because it's going so high. In the post-COVID era, all our countries right now, they are operating on budget deficits. And when the state decides to allocate an EMB $100 million or $500 million, it's not because they have budget surplus and therefore they have a lot of money at their disposal. So I think EMBs need to see themselves as part of the developmental election management, not just technicists, not just like election managers, but they need to see that as an impacting on the opportunity costs, on the state of the economy. Because when you take away, for instance, $500 million, it means if for a country which is operating on the budget deficits, it means that it has an impact on social policies implemented, for instance, on schools, on health. If they had planned to build more hospitals, you have to cut down on that and so on. And I think there has to be a conversation on that, which is not really taking place about the cost implications on development. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Finally, on a very specific question that was directed towards to you, Toby, about a democratic backsliding. I don't know if you caught it and if you're still online.
Is he still there? I don't think he's there.
Is Toby still online?
No.
He's gone to lecture. Good on you, Toby. But thank you very much for your presentation. The person who asked the question, may I please invite you to engage the panel afterwards and just come and visit us up here. At that point in time, we'll be down there, and we'll try and address your question in that manner. I want to make sure that we don't turn this into a symposium. We already had the symposium yesterday. What I'd like to do, in summary, is to address a number of questions that have come through online that have to do with civic education and all of those things in this way. The effect of backsliding is also the erosion of civility. And because there's an erosion of civility, people just cannot agree to disagree politely. Politeness has gone off the window, and the politics of respect have become very, very tricky. And therein comes this whole need for civic education, for educating. People now have to be taught that being respectful to each other in conversation is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. You can disagree and not call each other names. So that's the first thing. But it's a direct, I think, effect of this feature of democratic recession. And finally, when it comes to cost, it is that it's the impact of the trust deficit. If you are not trusted, if trust is not there, when you do a ballot paper, you have to build in 25 features to protect the ballot paper. in places where there isn't an issue of trust, a ballot paper, everyone has it, political parties can distribute it. You cannot do it where we live because we start from -200 or -1,000. So these things are interrelated. And I think the final word from us here, sitting here, is that practitioners of election practitioners are always busy. There's no downtime in elections. And so we very rarely have those moments where we pause to look at our practice and to say, what does this mean? And to remind ourselves that there's a bigger goal besides what it is that we do. And so I urge you to read this journal, to have it, most of these articles are going to be available free of charge. There is a link that you can go to and download the journal. But at this point in time, I have to thank my lovely, lovely panel. I did give you the impression that I was going to take a second round of inputs. No, I will not. I apologize to you. We are moving to close the session. And on that, please join me in thanking these contributors to a magnificent journal.
Thank you.
We are back to the ceremonial bit. So the writers have written, and Martha, who is the editor, has been working very, very hard to issue this publication. I wish to call to the stage the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, the current chair of the Association of World Electoral Bodies, Mr. Msutu Miepa. And by the way, please allow me to be totally out of order. She can scold me afterwards. Dr. Brigalia Bam has walked into the house.
That's so exciting.
Isn't she lovely? Thank you. The doyen of elections is here. Welcome, Ma. It's good to see you. Thank you very much. Let me invite you to the stage. But before I do that, I am sure I have skipped something because I have not written. Yes, I have.
I get to present it.
I have. So, Chair,
You can stay
before you
here.
fire me, come and
Stay
sit on my chair.
No.
Okay.
I'll
May I please ask you, Martha,
Yes.
to make your input, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm going to approach the podium.
Chair.
On behalf of SAYA, it is my privilege and honor, Mr. Chairman, can I call you Masutu, as in the same frame? With this symbolic copy of volume 30.3 of the South African Journal of International Affairs, I'll hand that to you. Yes? May I say a few words? Yes. I would like to just thank the IEC for initiating this special issue, for the support to, in fact, make it completely open access. I was hoping we might see the link on the screen at some point, but if you do not, please just Google volume 30.3 of the South African Journal of International Affairs, and you'll be able to read the entire set of papers, which we have printed up for the chairperson. And I would also like to thank the guest editors, and I will just name them again because it was a mammoth effort. Dr. Toby James, Professor Kabele Matlosa, and Dr. Victor Chalet. Thank you for your efforts. So I know that we are coming to a close, but I would just like to say this has been, what you hold in your hands is a culmination of hours of writing, thinking, discussing, and dare I say, editing. And what you have there, I believe, is an important contribution to the efforts to safeguard elections and to turn back democratic recession. So, may it be read widely, and I would like to say by leaders, policymakers, citizens, as well as autocrats and dictators. Good ending.
Chairperson of the Electoral Commission, before you make your remarks, may I please invite Dr. Sean Kim, representing AWEB, the Electoral Commission of South Africa, as the current chair of AWEB. This is one of our legacy projects during our term as president. And so we hand over this journal to AWEB. Thank you. Your clap is not commensurate with the work that has gone into it. Come along.
I will.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And on that note, may I please invite the chairperson of the Electoral Commission to please make his closing remarks.
My colleague and sister, Dr. Nomsa Masuku, I want to thank you for always facilitating the work that we do. As I received this publication, as I received it a moment ago, lots of thoughts raised in my mind. The provocation by the Chief Electoral Officer to Dr. Bridgman to say, when we started with this, she said, impossible. But here it is, done. That's us. When we work, we do work, and I'm grateful. But as I handed over this publication to the office we currently chair, from the southernmost tip of Africa to the rest of the world, I was saying to the Assistant Secretary General, Dr. Kim, Sean Kim as we call him, I was saying, take this to our office and to the rest of the world, and we will certainly follow that up. I'm here to do something I'm really privileged to do, to give a vote of thanks. I like wisdom. I think there's a lot of wisdom in this house, but I also like wisdom that has come from those that have gone before us. There is a king. I read a lot of his writings. He's called King Solomon. He said once, and I want to quote him, he says, do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it is in your power to act. I close that quote. That's really what I'm going to try and do. Not sure we'll do it as well as he does, but we're going to try. I stand on the protocols, Dr. Masuku, that you established this morning. And I know this. Someone once said, thank you is such a prayer that cannot be seen or touched. It must be felt. I don't know if you hear that. Thank you is not a prayer that can be seen or touched. It must be felt. I hope you will feel the thanks I'm about to give. I feel honored and privileged for this opportunity on behalf of the Electoral Commission of South Africa and the AWEB for you joining us this morning and celebrating with us this successful publication of the South African Journal of International Affairs. This special issue that we have this morning, volume 30, number 3, that is now available to all of you. This publication is part of the AWEB Legacy Project aimed at contributing knowledge and policy development in election management. It must never be something that sits to collect dust or give someone responsibility to always clean it and dust it. It must live in our minds. It must be reflected in the work we do. It must express the views of good governance, of progress in the spaces where we work. It must embrace the hard work that was taken to put it together, and it must be improved on. It must be a foundation that is laid once and many others that come after us will build upon. We want to thank the South African Institute of International Affairs and Taylor and Francis for accepting to publish this modest contribution to the discourse on elections and electoral democracy. It is a discourse that we want to take forward. We also thank the editorial team, the 13 article authors, and 4 book reviewers for digging deep in their research and delivering top academic work for global consumption. We may be South Africans, we may be sitting at the southernmost tip of Africa, but this is a world-class piece of work that we simply coordinated. We would like to appeal to all EMBs, to all think tanks, to all universities, to all civil society organizations, the media, and everyone who joined us online this morning to use this publication to ensure that it is worth all the investment and contributions in putting it together. It has been a long year of hard work. Ask Dr. Bridgman and the Chief Electoral Officer of South Africa. They have lived through this work, and here we are today. We further appeal to all sister EMBs to consider investing in electoral scholarship by providing a platform for thought leadership and also shaping the narrative as we now do through this special volume of this publication. Director of Ceremonies, ladies and gentlemen, the Electoral Commission has ensured that this publication is widely read by researchers and practitioners alike by paying for its availability on open access on the Taylor and Francis online portal. May this, thank you. May this not be a sunken cost. May every one of us benefit from this investment. In addition, the Electoral Commission is in the process of printing a modest number of hard copies which will be distributed globally for ease of access for all, especially in areas and regions where internet connectivity may prove difficult for downloading the online copies. I'd like to close by quoting Edgar Albert Guest in his poem, the vote of thanks. He says, and I quote, "For every man's work, there are a dozen who will let him do it," I close quote. We sit and bask in this glory because every one of the contributors, every one of those that have been involved in doing this work, sat there allowing us to do other things as we proceeded with our daily affairs. But today, we give honor where honor is due. And we want to say to all of you, thank you indeed. Your investment is a fruit we will cherish for always. I want to thank you heartily for being here this morning, for taking part and engaging in the work that has been done. May you be blessed even as you enrich this work, even as you engage in it going into the future. Thank you indeed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That marks the end of the launch. The journal is out. I'm sure you're relieved, Dr. Bridgman. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. We did run late, and I am never proud of that when the voting station does not open on time. It is a bad reflection on us as managers. May I ask the panelists, please? May I ask the chair of AWEB, may I ask the Chief Electoral Officer of South Africa to stand over there. And for the rest of you, please feel free. The official photographer is here. His name is Lwazi, by the way. Let me give him a name. He's out here. And you can all take pictures over there, and I'm walking there to show you where you should stand. And for the rest of you, join the photographs. Goodbye.
The exhibition.
Okay. I always forget something. The exhibition is on. I'm not sure where it is. CEO? Hall number 10. Thank you very much. Okay. I can't get everything right. Not a good excuse once again. Yeah. Please do go. People have carried things and set up an exhibition. It is, please honor their work by going to the exhibition. Remember, in the evening, it's gala time. And gala time is at what time? It's at 6:30. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. We're signing off. Just enjoying the cameras for a minute. Please.